All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. We have some MMA DFS picks. Line at advice. Vegas 38. Thiago Santos, Johnny Walker. October 2nd. We're here to break down the card, give you DFS tips, how to build your lineups for FanDuel and DraftKings, some best bets along the way. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jake the Snake, owner of MMA DFS.com, writer of our daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. Jake, what's up, man?
Not a whole lot. How you doing?
I am good. Coming back from the Maryland game, which was absolutely miserable, but I'm in time, home in time to break down this UFC slate, which I am excited about. And it seems like for the first time in forever, we don't actually have a mispriced fighter on DraftKings or FanDuel, and it's a relatively straightforward slate. It sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, fingers crossed, nothing changes from now until tomorrow.
Yeah, so we did get a fight canceled today. Aspen Ladd was like 1,000 pounds over the limit, and that fight was immediately canceled. So we're now down to 12 bouts. So Jake, let's. So for this video, for those of you watching, how it's going to work, we'll talk about the main event, how to bet it, what it means for DFS lineups, low risk and high risk contests, FanDuel and DraftKings. Talk about the one newcomer we do have on the card. A couple fights that we want to target for our DFS lineups. One low-owned tournament fighter that we really like, and then we'll close it out with a stream parlay of the week. So Jake, Thiago Santos, Johnny Walker. Santos on a pretty bad skid here, but the model really likes him this week. What are your thoughts on this fight and how we should deploy these fighters in low risk and high risk contests?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting that we do have Santos coming in on a 3-fight losing streak. I mean, Walker could be on a 3-fight losing streak of his own. He lost 2, and then he narrowly won his last one, and it looked like he was in rough waters there for a little bit. He got knocked down twice, taken down twice, comes back up, and he finishes Ryan Spann with elbows along the fence, like Travis Brown style elbows that Spann his corner protested that were illegal to the back of the head, but the KO stood, and now Spann's coming off, or I'm sorry, Walker's coming off a 1-fight winning streak opposed to a 3-fight losing streak. So we could have 2 guys coming off three fight skids, but so it is a little bit interesting. We've got Walker's just this like round 1 or bust, like roided out crazy dude that just goes nuts in the cage. He's throwing all sorts of crazy stuff. Santos he throws a little bit of like capoeira kicks. Like he gets a little crazy, but nothing like Walker in there. Like much older. Walker's only 29 years old. Santos is getting up there. He's like 37. He had double knee surgery after that John Jones fight, and he hasn't won a fight since then. So I mean, you kind of have to wonder like what he has left. So he moved up to 205 pounds in 2018 from 185 pounds. He won his first 3 fights by KO in the second and third rounds. Since then, he dropped 3 straight to John Jones, Glover Teixeira, and Alexander Rakic. So 3 really tough fighters. But it's been 2.5 years since he won a fight. So I mean, you have to wonder on this guy. But I mean, Walker is a round 1 KO or bust dude. I mean, if he doesn't win in the first round, he's going to completely gas out, and he's going to get finished after that. So it's unlikely this fight makes it past the second round, and I think it's like near impossible it makes it out of the third round. So we're looking at a KO in the first 3 rounds, either a Walker round 1 KO or a Santos, more likely round 2 or round 3, but potentially he could land a round 1 KO. He hasn't done it in a long time. I think you had to go all the way back to like 2017 for the last time he landed a round 1 KO. So he can still score well in round 2. Walker will score well in round 1. So we're still looking at a high score. The only way we get a low score winner, I think, is with a Santos like early round 3 KO. And even then, there's a chance it could score well, but that's kind of the one way this fight busts. But in low risk on DraftKings, I think you're still going to stack it like normal. You're going to anticipate getting a 100-point score. In high risk, I think you want one of these guys in the majority of your lineups. There's a lot more ways that they go off and put up a huge score than they bust. I mean, it's a really small window for this fight busting. It's literally, I mean, maybe an early round 2 KO with no knockdowns would be the one other way, but I mean, it's going to be hard to get no knockdowns in this fight. I mean, I'm expecting chaos from Walker's side. So I think you want a piece of it in most of your fights. So yeah, I mean, I think that's everything I have to say about it.
Awesome, yeah. And Santos is interesting because he hasn't looked the same, and there's zero aggression in that last fight. But again, this is a major step down in competition compared to the guys that you just mentioned that he recently fought. So, and it's always matchup based, right? We try not to be recency biased here in DFS and predicting fights. So it makes it tough. It's definitely a tough matchup. But again, like you said, it is one to target. And even though it's a 5-rounder, probably won't make it 5 rounds, but we're going to get a ton of fantasy scoring regardless. So let's keep that in mind. All right, let's go to the newcomer. We always like to target fights with newcomers because of the wide range of outcomes, how there's little information to dictate the betting markets. Breeden is making his debut against your boy Hernandez, Jake. And um, I got to be honest, right? So we got to chart the fights for the data for the model for these newcomers. Charted Breeden. Then I looked at the odds, and I was kind of shocked at how wide this line is. Not saying that Breeden's some world beater, but I got to say, I figured it would be a little bit of a closer money line, especially considering the guy he's facing.
That's so too, man. I mean, you see a lot of people like really hyping up Hernandez. I mean, the guy's 3-3 in his last 6 fights. I think he's overrated personally. I'm not saying Breeden's great. I mean, obviously Hernandez is the big favorite for a reason, but I mean, Breeden looks durable. He's a one-dimensional striker. He's not going to mix in any grappling. He stands a little flat-footed. He got his leg absolutely chewed up on the Contender Series fight. Almost got finished by leg strikes. Barely hung on to see a decision. He lost the decision. But I mean, overall, he's won 5 of his last 6 fights. He knocked out Brandon Jenkins, who recently made his UFC debut with a flying knee back in 2019. I mean, I don't think Breeden's great, but he's durable and he throws hard punches. He used to fight at 170 pounds. So I think he can at least be competitive, but we'll see. I mean, maybe he comes in there and just gets completely steamrolled. I still think Hernandez is overrated, but I mean, maybe we see another, Chris Gutzemacher fight where, it just comes in, looks terrible, and Hernandez just completely runs over him. But I don't know. I think that there are ways that fight busts, and I think Hernandez is going to be really popular. I think it's more likely the fight busts than Breeden actually wins. So I'm not saying you should play Breeden, but I mean, he's got a puncher's chance. 8 of his 10 career wins have come by KO. So I mean, the guy's a KO specialist. Hernandez has been knocked out in 2 of his 4 losses. Those, both of those came semi-recently. So, I mean, there's always a chance. You never know. So for tournaments, we're looking at Breeden's ownership. Checks in super low. He's going to be, 12%, could be even lower, could be single digits. Hernandez projects to be over 40% owned. Makes sense to, throw a dart at a Breeden lineup or 2. And I think going under Hernandez is the move. And I'm just kind of hoping that the fight busts. But, I mean, obviously still want to have pretty good exposure. Hernandez is normally a round 1 or bust play, and Breeden's only been knocked out once in his career.
Totally makes sense. And at least someone out there agrees with us because the money line has moved slightly in Breeden's favor despite him weighing 2.5 pounds over the limit on Friday, which you can kind of overlook because he took the fight on, a week notice or whatever it may be. So, a little 50-cent move in his way. He's down to plus 350. Whether that means anything, we'll have to wait till Saturday. So, so speaking of fights that we want to target, Jay, give me 1 or 2 fights that you really like both sides or you think the fight, no matter who wins, can produce a high score for fantasy lineups.
So normally I have at least like 1 fight where I'm going to be super heavily exposed. I feel like this week there's a lot of fights where I kind of want like decent exposure, but I'm not going all in on any of them. But I feel like the easy one that also feels like it could be a trap is the Devontae Smith-Jamie Mullarkey fight. Smith has never been to a decision in 13 pro fights. He's 11-2. 12 of Mullarkey's 13 pro wins have come early with 9 KOs, 3 submissions. He's got 7 first-round finishes. He's coming off a, I believe, 46-second round 1 KO of Kama Worthy, who knocked out Devontae Smith in his second most recent fight. And I'm not trying to get into MMA math there. I'm just saying that, it could be competitive. I think Smith has more power. He's more explosive. He's more dangerous in the first round. But I think Mullarkey is more durable. He's got his wrestling to fall back on. And I think if the fight gets out of the first round, I think Mullarkey has a really good chance for the later rounds or potentially to win kind of a high volume, maybe a grappling heavy decision. But it's hard to say, if Smith ends up winning a decision, that fight could easily bust. But I do think it's one that makes sense to target. It's the second most likely on the slate to end early. Both guys generally have put up big scores. I mean, they've always put up big scores when they've gotten a finish, and they almost always get finishes when they win. Malarkey did lose a pair of decisions in his first two UFC fights. That Brad Riddell fight was absolutely insane. I go back and rewatch that fight like once every 3 months and just like laugh at like Brad Riddell throwing a punch off his knee as the final bell goes off and hitting Malarkey. And Malarkey's just like, really, dude? I mean, that might be one of my favorite like scenes of any fight is the end of the Riddell Malarkey brawl. I mean, that fight was absolutely crazy. So I do think it's going to be a high volume nutty fight, but there's a slight chance Malarkey is just so durable that it goes to a decision. And even with a ton of strikes, if it stays up on the feet, if we don't get any knockdowns, if we don't get any takedowns, then maybe it still disappoints. But I do think there's a good chance that the winner of that scores well. The other one I'm looking at is Jatko Serkinov. And the reason I'm not calling that, a fight to target is because I really like Serkinov. And I always like everyone going against Serkinov, but I really hate Jatko. So it's really hard for me to say target him. But I mean, I do think you should match the field on Jatko's ownership because, Serkinov has been to 7 straight fights that have ended in round 1, and he's lost 4 of those by round 1 KO, but against far tougher competition than Jatko. And now he's moving down to 185 pounds for the first time in his career from 205. So it's a super high variance spot where we don't really know how he's going to look. And we've seen guys look absolutely terrible dropping down. And if that happens, I think there actually is kind of a under the radar chance that Jatko gets a round 1 KO. And I mean, Jatko is like such a gross DFS play. He basically never scores well. I think he had one first round finish a long time ago that scored well, and everything else. He's just a decision machine that has done a lot more losing than winning. He had shoulder surgery a couple of years ago. But I think you match the field on Jatko. You at least match on Serkinov. He's going to be popular, which makes it a little bit less appealing. I mean, if you're doing a match on a popular fight, and I mean, there's no real leverage to be gained, but it is one that I expect to end in the first round. So I think you might have to, get unique elsewhere and have a piece of that in the winning lineup. So those are kind of the two that I'm looking at to target, I think, primarily.
I will say, Jocko, those are the types of plays that we don't mind playing, even though they're typically gross. The history isn't there for high scoring, but at low ownership against a guy who has 4 first round KOs against him or has been knocked out 4 times in the first round, that's the move you want to make, and especially. First of all, this never works out right. When the underdog is like twice as popular as the favorite, it seems like it never works out. But the play is to play the favorite here at lower ownership against a guy who has I think questionable is a nice term for his chin. So it's kind of crazy.
It's true. It's true. But look at who Serkinov has been knocked out by. It's Ryan Spann, Johnny Walker, Glover Teixeira, Volkan Ozdemir. All guys that are 100 times more powerful than Jatko. But I mean, who knows? I mean, we haven't seen him go against like these super terrible guys. Maybe they would have knocked him out too. That's all I'm saying.
That is very true. That is very true. All right. So Jocko's kind of gross at 16%. Let's give a tournament fighter that we don't think is as gross. That's less than 20% on DraftKings. We always know we need those 1 or 2 low-owned fighters to get to the top of tournaments. Which sub 20% fighter, Jake, are you eyeing that you don't think is gross?
This is actually, I love this play. Stephanie Egger, she's coming off a loss in her UFC debut against Tracy Cortez, where super grappling heavy. She didn't do well. Short notice debut. She's a judo black belt going against a terrible Shanna Young. I think Stephanie Egger bounces back in a big way here. 4 of her 5 career wins have come in the first round. She doesn't have a ton of MMA fights, only 7 in her career, but when she wins, she is absolutely smashed with first round wins. I think that Shanna Young is kind of like a Sarah Alper type play. And ironically, Shanna Young actually lost to Sarah Alper on the Contender Series, which just kind of proves that, she's not good. And I think it's a great spot for Egger to bounce back. Egger is the cheapest favorite on both sites, which it could end up driving up her ownership a little bit more than we have it. But at the same time, she scored like 20 points in her UFC debut. So I think she'll fly pretty much under the radar.
Yeah, and has, her tape wasn't the easiest to find, if I recall correctly, from when we tried her last year. But again, we were high on her coming into the UFC, and she got matched up with a really tough opponent in her debut. So this is just a layup opportunity in her second matchup. And I couldn't be more pumped to get her at sub 20% ownership in this spot. So I totally agree with you, Jake. She's definitely my favorite fighter under 20%. Really quickly, before we get to our stream parlay, we haven't talked about the plug cover girl, King Casey O'Neill. Made me 100K richer back in February. Absolutely dominated as a dog this summer, and now she gets a little bit, at least a UFC veteran against Correa. But Correa checked in 2.5 pounds over the limit, Jake. And oh wait, no, Correa is fighting Rosa, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're both great plays. I get it. I get it mixing them up. We like Rosa and O'Neal, but O'Neal's getting Shevchenko.
Yes, yes. Shevchenko, the worst Shevchenko sister, who gets dominated on the ground. O'Neal is great at dominating people on the ground. Jake, this looks like another smash spot for her.
It really does. I mean, I sort of doubted O'Neal last time, like just because I thought she was going to be super popular, and it looked like a tougher matchup against Procopia, and she absolutely exploded once again. Not going to make that mistake a second time. I mean, Shevchenko is significantly taller than O'Neal, which is the only thing that worries me a little bit. But honestly, we've seen Shevchenko get absolutely dominated on the mat in her last 3 losses. And I think O'Neal is better. I mean, honestly, better than Modafferi for sure, better than Andrea Lee. I think you could make an argument she's better than Chikagian, at least in terms of certain parts of her game. So I have a hard time seeing her not getting Shevchenko down and just beating her up. It looks like an ideal matchup for just another ground and pound, massive win.
Hell yeah, that's what we love to hear. So King Casey, our top play of the slate. All right, Jake, we got to hit a stream parlay eventually. The universe has to let us hit it. So I'll pick one of your best bets from the plug. You take one. We'll add them together. We'll see if we can hit. I'm going to go with the fighter we just talked about, Stephanie Egger, inside the distance, plus 330. Really think this is just a perfect setup for her. So that'll be my side of the parlay.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's a great bet. Really think she gets a finish here. It could come through ground and pound. It could come through a submission on the ground, but really think she gets a finish. I don't think Shanna Young should be in the UFC, so really like that one. I'll go with another one we talked about. I'll go Jatko Sirkunov ends in round 1 at plus 190. Because that one could go either way, but I don't see it making it out of the first round. So I think that's kind of a safer option there. And if you want to get riskier, you can always go Sirkunov round 1 sub and Egger round 1 win if you want to get wild, but I think we need to win one of these, so let's go with the toned down version. So like those two are going to add up from 11.5 to 1, more or less, plus 1147.
We'll take it. We just need to hit like 6, 7 more of those for the stream parlays. We'll be back even for the year. But yeah, if you're not parlaying our stream parlays, just listen to Jake's bets that he puts in the plug, that he puts on MMADFS.com. You are certainly up for the year if you're tailing those. So speaking of that, MMADFS.com is where you can get the sheet written by Jake every single week, breaks down every single fight on the card, fighters' histories, and betting and DFS implications every fight. Go check that out. Jake also writes the daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. You saw it on screen here for a little bit. Gives the top plays for FanDuel and DraftKings, low risk and high risk contests, his best bets, and then the best part, he tells you how to deploy those plays in low risk and high risk lineups. Everything you need roadmap to be successful in DFS. So check that out at OccupyFantasy.com. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when we do these UFC videos every Friday. We're doing NFL videos every single day of the week. You don't want to miss any of those. Give us a thumbs up if you like the UFC content. If you have questions, join the Discord channel. Click the join button below the video. Talk to other Occupy Fantasy members and Occupy Fantasy staff to get your DFS questions answered. So follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA. You can follow me at BrianJesterFF. Follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate everyone listening, and good luck on Saturday.